Chat to you. Welcome into the Confessional podcast. It is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. And your New Orleans Pelicans, by the way, are currently leading Toronto Raptors 68-45 at halftime. Come on, Pels. Finish the season strong. These are games they got to win, by the way, because they are notorious. If you've been following the Pelicans all this year, they are notorious for teams that are below 500 losing to them. So I want to see them beat the tar out of the Raptors. And they are right now. Actually held the Raptors to 17 points in the second quarter. But this is a Saints podcast. But look, we give love to all New Orleans sports. We give love to all New Orleans sports. So shout out. Actually, we give love to the entire boot. But shout out to the New Orleans Pelicans. May you be prosperous, as the New Orleans Saints are attempting to be prosperous right now with potential trades of Marshon Lattimore, with free agency coming on up, and more we're going to talk about tonight in a nice little short episode, as well as the New Orleans Saints meeting with, well, a whole bunch of people, honestly. I mean, it's the draft time. So, I mean, this is going to happen. And I'm curious to see where the New Orleans Saints try to head for in terms of free agency, and then who could potentially end up being the guy that is the number one draft pick for them. I'm curious what y'all think as well. Who dat to those who are in the chat already. As always, it is amazing to spend time on my evenings with all of y'all. TJ, Nikki DeFish, Chase Cottom, Paul Parker, Chemo Slice, Mac Tizino, Cam B, James Griffon, Gundam, who is here, and predictably, and I'm not even mad at you for this, sir. That man came in, and the first thing he said, predictably, was about Jaden Daniels getting drafted by the New Orleans Saints. This man wants Jaden Daniels to get drafted more than Jaden Daniels wants to get drafted. He's going to get drafted, by the way, but the way that it's looking now, he's going to get drafted in like the top 5 picks. So the New Orleans Saints don't even have an opportunity to disappoint you, Gundam. But hey, who knows? Shout out to Michael Jackson. I'm sure it's the one who is still alive, the one who has not left us. And Anthony Morris, Soul Vision, James Griffon, everybody else, who to you, welcome in. Hope you're having an amazing day and an amazing evening. So the New Orleans Saints recently, we actually talked about this a couple episodes ago. Giovanni Martinez, great to see you. We talked about this a couple episodes ago where the way that DA was talking made it seem like Marshon Lattimore wasn't going anywhere. And actually, we shared several quotes. And I talked about how DA said specifically how much of an important piece to this defense Marshon Lattimore was. Well, now more and more, we're seeing, I wouldn't call them reports, but more obvious things that are predictable coming out and being made public. And one of those things is Marshon Lattimore is a player that a lot of teams are interested in trying to pick up. Now, a big reason that obviously has to do with the fact that he's extremely talented, right? This is a Pro Bowl level corner that I would argue is all pro level. I would put, when he's healthy, his best is as good as just about anybody else's best. So I would put him in that same stratosphere. Would I say he's the best corner in the NFL? I would say that there are moments where he's been the best corner in the NFL. I don't necessarily think he is now, but I do think he's very talented. He's still young. And there are teams that would love to have an elite corner for, 3-4 years. And I think that's what he can be, assuming he can be healthy. I want him to be healthy. Giovanni, I didn't forget you, by the way. You just didn't show up on the chat yet. But I do want him to be successful wherever he is. Hopefully that is New Orleans. But at the same time, if the Saints, and because I never want to flip-flop. I always want to be very honest with my opinions. If the Saints could find good value, I am okay trading Lattimore. I've said that. But at the same time, you don't just get rid of him. You wait and see, okay, how is this potentially going to play out? Well, predictably, there are teams interested in Marshon Lattimore, but that doesn't guarantee anybody's going to actually trade for him, or that the New Orleans Saints are going to get rid of him. If anything, I think it actually says how much New Orleans is not trying to move him, how this is something that it is just in the discussion phase. He's also one of the few pieces that a lot of teams would actually go after. Now, here's where it's coming from. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler talked about it at Indianapolis about, informal meetings taking place at the Combine, and part of those meetings being about Marshon Lattimore getting traded. Now, one of the teams linked to being interested in Marshon Lattimore are the Detroit Lions, which obviously would have links with Dan Campbell, and the Miami Dolphins, amongst two that supposedly, this is the words that were used, aggressively looking to upgrade their depth charts, with Marshon Lattimore being one of the premier names on said list. Now, none of this guarantees anything that's actually going to happen. But to have an actual report come out brings validity to something that we've talked about. And again, I don't think that New Orleans is necessarily shopping Marshon Lattimore, but I do think that they are open to it. And again, these are only two teams that Fowler has talked about. There are other teams I believe are making, a call to at least kind of fill out what the process would be. That said, I think that it would have to be an extremely New Orleans beneficial deal for them to be willing to take that move, because it's not a situation like when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got traded. Chauncey was not going to play that season for New Orleans. Chauncey was probably not going to be on that team. No, it wasn't even probably. He wasn't going to be on the team. So New Orleans was scrambling to get what they could. Now, could they have handled the situation better? I mean, sure. Should have ever got to that point. Yeah, let's argue that. Cool. On a different day. Let's not turn today's podcast into arguing about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson 2 years later. But New Orleans had to make a move, and they got what they could, and that's why we will kind of always, as fans and analysts, remember that as New Orleans getting fleeced. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson by the Eagles, even though he wasn't even on the Eagles the next year, because similar problems to what he had brought with him to New Orleans manifested in Philly, and Philly said, we're not about to fool with it, and then he left and went to Detroit. So all in all, New Orleans got out of the situation, but didn't probably get compensation for a player in terms of how talented he was. Marshon Lattimore is not the same situation. I mean, they're nowhere even close. So Marshon Lattimore is a situation that, in theory, New Orleans holds all the leverage, because at the end of the day, they can afford to keep Lattimore. It doesn't hurt them to have Lattimore. And if they keep him, then the worst thing that has happened is they have a top-tier corner on their roster. The best thing that happens is if they manage to get a high-value draft pick or draft pick and players that fill in their roster, as well as offset dead money or offset structured money off their books. So there's definitely a win-win scenario in theory. Now, it is quite possible that the Philadelphia Eagles come through and fleece New Orleans again and give us a 5th-round pick for Marshon Lattimore, and we're all sitting here looking at Mickey Loomis going, what in the absolute ever is wrong with you? Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but it's completely possible. I think there are a lot of people out there right now who do not have the faith in Mickey Loomis that maybe they did 10 years ago or even 15 years ago or heck, even 5 years ago. I think that there are plenty of fans, and I think that there's some valid reasons there, who don't have as much faith in Mickey Loomis, right? Now, there are a lot of people out there talking about how bad New Orleans draft has been. I don't agree with that. But one thing that a lot of people talk about that I do agree with is that the financial structure of New Orleans is precarious at times. I understand why they do it the way they do it, and I don't have a huge issue with it, but it is more difficult to operate how they do financially. And I would argue that New Orleans basically, at least on our paper sheets, never wins a trade. So even though I don't agree with what is really getting louder and louder in the past few weeks, that New Orleans supposedly doesn't draft well recently, and I just don't feel like that's accurate, I definitely will agree that when it comes to trades, I can't name many trades in the past, 10, 15 years that I'm just like, wow, New Orleans just won that trade. They did fantastic. So I can understand the hesitation to be confident in a move of what is basically your only superstar. And the reason I say that, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, but I'm sorry, Saints fans, Alvin Kamara is not going to get you anything. Demario Davis isn't going to get you anything if you were to trade them, that is. Cameron Jordan's not going to get you anything. Honey Badger's not going to get you anything. And you would not get rid of Chris Olave because he's the only young stud who's worth anything. Now, I'm not saying that they would try to shop any of those players anyway. I'm just simply saying that literally the only piece that is valuable, as in what we would see as a high draft pick or a mid draft pick that came with another good player, is Marshon Lattimore, a Pro Bowl level corner who is still in his prime. He's not even 30. He's 27 years old. So, or 28 years old. So he's basically it. Now, I guess in theory, you could argue that Chris Olave could be traded, but I don't think that there's anybody else on the offense with any type of value. So why would you trade your only valuable piece, where at least on the defense, you do have value, just maybe not value in trade. You have value on the field. You don't really have as much field value on offense, not saying to what Clint Kubiak could elevate the team to do. So overall, I understand any disbelief or suspension of belief that fans might have on the New Orleans Saints winning this type of trade. Now, Poe Porter says we won the Jimmy Graham trade. I know just as many people who say that New Orleans lost the Jimmy Graham trade. In fact, I will reference a place. Ralph over with the Saints Happy Hour podcast. Now, obviously, our podcasts are very different styles, right? And I've always said that even though that's not my style of podcast, I respect all podcasts for the space that they occupy and love that they exist. Well, Ralph is a very loud voice. The New Orleans Saints get absolutely destroyed in the Jimmy Graham trade. Now, personally, I tend to believe the New Orleans won there because New Orleans got a Pro Bowl level offensive lineman and a first rounder. I'm like, yeah, I'll take that trade every time. But not everybody agrees with that. But I would also say that if you look at other trades, not just the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson one in recent years, can't really say I'm sitting here going, wow, New Orleans is doing a great job. In fact, it almost became a running meme, especially here on the show, where we talked about, anytime New Orleans trades with New England and Bill Belichick, they get fleeced. That's how it felt. And it felt like the past couple times that New Orleans traded with the Philadelphia Eagles, that they really ended up giving way more and didn't get the value you felt they deserved as a fan. I think that's fair. And Gundam says Lattimore is worth 2 first-rounders and throw in a third. I'll be honest. I don't think Lattimore is worth that. I think Lattimore on a really, really optimistic trade is worth a first-rounder. And it really depends on where that first-rounder is at. But that's more based on the precedent of what we've seen with cornerback trades, which vary year to year. I will say this. We talk about New Orleans Saints getting shafted on trades and stuff, but I'll be honest. It ain't just New Orleans because there have been some good corners that we've seen, at least that I would say are good corners that we've seen get traded for, pennies on the dollar. At least it felt that way. And to give some examples, you can actually go, if you've ever used some of the websites that we talk about, Spot Rack is one of them. We talk about them a lot during the offseason because they track a lot of the contracts as well as over the cap, but they actually track transactions as well. So you can actually go on their website and track cornerbacks and how they've been traded. So what I'm actually going to do is share in the chat that link so y'all can go look at these yourself. So it's not just me saying it. For example, Rasul Douglas is a well-known name. I wouldn't necessarily say he's an elite player at the time of this trade back in October, but Green Bay Packers, 3rd-round pick, what they got for Rasul Douglas. And Rasul Douglas went with a 5th-round pick to Buffalo. And then you go back just a couple years before, although technically I guess you could talk about J.C. Jackson, which was a little bit of a little wild one to me, the way that worked out. Basically, pennies on the dollar. But you go back to even Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey, especially at the time, I would say was a very high-end value player, but was getting traded for like a 3rd-round pick. And again, those are all the ones that y'all can look at. I just gave y'all the links. Y'all can check out some of these trades. That way y'all can find some of the comparisons for yourself. Like when Stephon Gilmore got traded last year. Again, some of these are older wide receivers, but I bring up the names because even though I do believe that Marshon Lattimore is in his prime, he is getting towards the end of said prime. Stephon Gilmore went for a 5th and a running back. And I feel like Stephon Gilmore was, an okay player, right? Jalen Ramsey was a 3rd-round pick and Hunter Long. So Hunter Long and a 3rd-round pick. Hunter Long's a tight end. So you got a backup tight end and a 3rd-round pick for Jalen Ramsey. That's what Miami got when they made the trade for him. So there's definitely recent precedent that kind of drives that price down. But at the same time, if you go back even just a couple years, you're going to find high-end guys going for high-end prices. So the cornerback market has been a little volatile, as in it's a little bit unpredictable at times what you can expect a guy to go for. And if I'm the New Orleans Saints, I try to play it as close to the vest as I can and try to get as much value because, again, what I said before is still true. The worst thing that happens is that you have a Pro Bowl level corner on the roster. But I think of like trades that were really, really good for certain teams. Like Indianapolis got Yannick Ngakoue for Rock Yassin, the corner. I felt like that was a fantastic trade at the time that it happened for Indy. If the New Orleans Saints could get a guy who in theory could get double-digit sacks, yeah, fantastic. If that could happen, right? So it's all about what New Orleans gets offered. And if you have reports of teams actually making those conversations, well, that's why we're talking about this today, right? What could that actually end up looking like? Now, I brought up the unique Ngakoue version because that's a multiple time player who's had 10 plus sacks with 2 different teams. Now, I know that he's bounced around a lot of teams, and there's reasons for that, but New Orleans' biggest need is definitely getting after the passer. So we'll see. We'll see. And also, random Kansas City Chiefs fan just came into the chat as if nobody respects. What I don't understand, real quick, this is a quick sideway for those listening. We just had a Kansas City Chiefs fan like roll in out of nowhere saying, put some respect on Patrick Mahomes' name. And I'm just very curious, legitimately, who is disrespecting Pat? Like, that's like some Michael Jordan invent my own bulletin board material craziness. Like, I don't know if y'all watched The Last Dance, which, by the way, fantastic documentary from a couple years ago. Jordan would literally just straight up lie and make up his own bulletin board material because he needed to get into a headspace. And I'm pretty convinced that Wasted Bananas that just came through our live chat podcast is actually Patrick Mahomes, who is just building his own bulletin board material because ain't nobody in the damn world right now saying that Patrick Mahomes is not the best in the league. Nobody. Who? What? Yeah, this is literally when they gave the MVP to Karl Malone. That is literally what's happening right now. That's Michael Jordan getting pissed off for no reason, even though he's the best player in the league. That's what just happened. Wasted Bananas is actually Patrick Mahomes. But anyway, if the New Orleans Saints could get a trade that was valuable to them is more the point that I'm trying to make. You know, if you are going to trade the man, the myth, the legend, Marshon Lattimore, you better get something valuable. Because I also want to say this. Speaking of trades, remember when New Orleans acquired Bradley Roby? Now, Bradley Roby was a good player. No shade being thrown at Bradley Roby right now. Bradley Roby, at his peak, was not Marshon Lattimore. He was not. Now, I'm not saying Bradley Roby is a bad player. I think Bradley Roby is a very good corner, not at this point in his career. You know, he's going to be 32 this year. I doubt he's even on a team. You know, he was a good player in his career. Solid starter. Not bad, but not great, but good enough to literally be in the NFL for 10 years as a corner. That's good. Why do I bring up Bradley Roby? When New Orleans got Bradley Roby, they paid a third and a sixth. So if you only got, say, a third for Lattimore, I would say you lost, right? Like, I would actually say the team that only got a third for Jalen Ramsey lost because Bradley Roby also went for a third and a sixth, and Jalen Ramsey is far superior to Bradley Roby. The only difference is Bradley Roby had a massive contract, and maybe that plays into how you value it pick-wise if you're talking about trading for draft picks. But like if you were to say Marshon Lattimore is traded to the Detroit Lions right now for their third-round pick, I would say New Orleans got fleeced. That would be my reaction. New Orleans got absolutely fleeced. That's assuming that, you know, a third-round pick happened. Now, that third-round pick for Detroit could be like pick 73, which is a semi-decent third-round pick, but that's a complete fleecing, right? Now, if you start moving into it being a top 40 pick, maybe we're cooking with peanut oil a little bit more, and we're talking about like a top 80 pick. But it really comes down to what you value Marshon Lattimore at, because I think the key for New Orleans is just remembering the worst thing that happens in this situation is you have a Pro Bowl level corner, and you don't get rid of that for the sake of getting rid of it. You embrace it, you enjoy it, and you let somebody else come overpay for once to get what you need. Right? Nothing wrong with that at all. And if that's what happens, that's what happens. And sometimes maybe you find a guy in the draft that you like. You know, for example, I didn't like the New Orleans Saints when they did this, but go back to 2021 during the draft, we traded up to pick 76 to take Paulson Adebo. And it has worked out beautifully for New Orleans. But we actually had 2 third-rounders that we traded. We actually gave away the 98 and the 105 pick to basically move up, 20 spots. Well, you overpaid there. And that's kind of the point I was making, 15 minutes ago. The New Orleans Saints do not have a history recently where I feel like they are just winning trades. I feel like New Orleans, their style is more of we make the trade we need to make to make it happen. Even if we pay a lot, we want to make sure we get what we need. Does that make sense? And I don't feel like that's always the best plan. And I will say that I like some of their bargain sale stuff. Like, for example, they managed to get a 7th rounder for Will Lutz. Hey, okay, cool. Yeah, no big deal. You got something for Will Lutz who you weren't going to keep. Now, I'm not saying they should have kept him. I think it actually ended up working okay for New Orleans with Will Lutz moving on. They actually got something for Adam Trautman. If you remember, New Orleans actually got A.T. Perry because they traded Adam Trautman to the Denver Broncos. That's nice. I mean, we're talking about 6th round picks here. Yeah, that's you also, just to add some clarification, you also traded up to draft Jake Haener. Yikes. No offense, Jake Haener. You could become amazing. But right now, until you're amazing, it looks kind of sus, right? A team that needs draft picks traded up to draft Nick Saldiveri and gave away a 4th and a 5th. But here's the thing. The 5th rounder they gave away ended up becoming Terrell Smith. But the 5th rounder they gave away, they only moved up 12 spots and then gave away a 5th round pick. Just, you need to pick numbers. Like that's the thing New Orleans needs the most. They need to pick numbers. And when they picked up Chris Olave, which I have no real issue picking up Chris Olave, they moved up 5 spots to get Olave and gave up a 3rd rounder and a 4th rounder, which is again, in the grand scheme, is kind of fine on that one. But New Orleans' strategy basically seems to be, we're going to make sure the trade happens instead of make sure we win the trade value, which is okay when you're a winning team. So some of the moves they made, 5-10 years ago are fine. I have no issue with that. Actually, I have no issue in 2021 when you trade for Bradley Roby because you feel like you're still a contending team. But now New Orleans needs to trade to make sure that they are getting value. In my opinion, that's what they should be doing. Trading to make sure they're getting value. And as I'm going through New Orleans trade history, I will acknowledge real quickly some wins I forgot they had. Example, they traded Kiko Alonso and a 5th round pick to get Quan Alexander. And I know that Quan wasn't always healthy, but that was a win of a trade. I do want to throw that up. King Arthur says, you don't break up a duo like Sean and Debo. Debo is breaking out because Lattimore is shutting down his side, the field, more times than not. I absolutely do break that up if I believe in Alante Taylor. And I do believe in Alante Taylor as a boundary corner. I also believe that New Orleans should try to offload as much of these big contracts as possible and acquire new, younger talent. And a corner who's been injured for a couple years in a row and is one of the highest numbers on your books, if you can get good value, is an okay move to make. Be very clear. I am strongly opposed to just taking a 3rd round pick to dump Lattimore. Absolutely not. Keep Lattimore, ball out. Keep Lattimore and ball out. But somebody throws you a 1st round pick for Lattimore and is going to eat the contract, and you have 2 very good, younger, healthier corners, absolutely. I'm considering, I'm having the conversation. I'm not just hanging up the phone and laughing. Also, the Kiko Alonso that we traded away, we actually traded Vince Beagle to pick up Kiko Alonso. Fun, take you back in history fact. And we actually traded for Eli Apple, gave away a 4th and a 7th. Fun, just taking it back. So, and all of this to say, New Orleans needs to be in the driver's seat here. Like, New Orleans has to be the one that wins the trades from now on. If they are not getting value, then don't trade him. Like, if you do not feel like you are winning the trade, do not make the trade. Do not make a trade because you need to make a trade. Make a trade because somebody offered you something that you really shouldn't pass up. That's the difference. And that's where I'm at. Randall says, Deuce, are we talking about the same Taylor that got benched twice this season because he was getting burnt? He got benched as a nickel player. And here's what happened both times. You seem to forget this, Randall. What happened when they benched him? He didn't actually get out the game. All they did was move him to the outside. And what did he do? He played well. So, the whole, Alante Taylor gets benched always gets used as if he was just terrible last year. Which, by the way, Paul Debo also had a quote-unquote sophomore slump and then balled out in year 3. I don't know why we don't expect Taylor to do the exact same thing when he balled out in year 1. But literally when they took him off the field, what did they then immediately go do? Put him back on the field just in a position that he was better at, which is on the boundary. I don't see the issue. And just to provide numbers, last year, Alante Taylor, every single game except for one, played 68% of the snaps or more. And that's including the games he was quote unquote benched. Why? Because they put him out on the boundary. He struggled at times as the nickel because it was his first time ever playing that. And that's understandable. You're in the NFL. You've never done this. It's harder. That's fine. I'm not saying that Alante Taylor had a great year, but I am saying that it's misleading to say he got benched. Because it's not like they took him off the field and were chewing him out. They simply said, look, they're taking advantage of this matchup. We got to move you to the boundary because you're a liability in this matchup. You are simply not doing well here, but you're good enough. We need to keep you on the field. Alante Taylor last year, even playing as a nickel, gave up a quarterback rating of 85.6. That's still really good, and that's with his nickel snaps. Now, the one thing about Alante Taylor that he does deserve to get some flack for, missed tackles. Dude has led the team in missed tackles for 2 straight years. That's obviously something that needs, if you want to gripe about him or something, I feel like that's a more legitimate gripe. Missed tackles have been a big issue for him both his years in the league. He needs to get that together. Like he's had a high missed tackle percentage 2 years in a row. But his rookie year gave up a quarterback rating of 62 when targeted, pure boundary. And then that went up only 20 points because he was mixing boundary and nickel. And yeah, he did not play well in certain nickel situations. But he was on the field more than most of your favorite players. Right? I think that's just fine. And yeah, it's another reason why I'm actually okay with Lattimore moving, because it'll put Alante Taylor back in his natural position. He's also 3 years younger and healthier. I'm not trying to move Marshon Lattimore. I'm just saying that if a irresistible offer comes, you're in a position to accept the irresistible offer. But if the irresistible offer doesn't come, again, you've got a Pro Bowl corner and you're fine. That's a good position to be in because it's basically the only spot New Orleans is in that position. King says, in your opinion, do you trade a sure thing for a draft maybe? Lattimore is proven. Well, I don't think you're trading for a maybe. Like, I don't think that you would be trading Marshon Lattimore for a first-round pick to then go draft a first-round corner. I mean, I guess you could, but I don't think that's what you're doing. That would be the offensive lineman you needed or the defensive lineman you needed. You know, maybe the quarterback of the future, right? And Gundam's out there just screaming Jaden Daniels. I don't think you're doing that because you have 2 proven, very good players on the boundary. But again, the deal has to be quite good. Quite good. And the other bonus to both Paulson Adebo and Alante Taylor is their own rookie contracts. With Alante Taylor having 2 more years and Paulson Adebo having this year on a rookie contract. And then we'll see if they re-sign him. And if so, what do they re-sign him to? So, and I still am not confident. I really don't believe the New Orleans are going to trade Lattimore. But the fact that we now have reports of teams legitimately reaching out about it means that it's worth discussing. And I think for me, it has to be something that New Orleans unquestionably wins. Unquestionably wins. Rainey says, like Marcus Williams missed tackles. Well, here's the thing about Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams actually did have a missed tackle problem basically his first 2 years in the league. You can track his missed tackles, but he cleaned it up. And then what happened is people kind of like just kept it going. Like, oh, he missed the great one in Minnesota, so clearly he sucks. But I mean, his last 4 years in New Orleans, he was actually a very good tackler. Well, Alante Taylor last year, right under 16% missed tackle rate. That's not good. that's very not good. That's very not good. Like, that's up there in the league, like in terms of league numbers in missed tackles for a starting corner. So that's something he's got to clean up. And I think that he can. Again, because it's the second year. And we talk about all players, third years where you really start to see them hopefully be who they're going to be in the NFL for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So anyway, here we are. I'm just curious what New Orleans does because, again, if they were going to make a trade to try to move up in the draft, the only player capital they realistically have to move is Lattimore. And there's nobody else. At least there's nobody else that somebody's going to give a high value pick for. There's plenty of people that you could get a 4th round or a 5th round for. But the only person that arguably could get you a high round draft pick is Lattimore. So if they were going to make that type of move, it would have to be Lattimore. King says, what is a bare minimum package that you're willing to trade Lattimore for? Bare minimum. Now, this is me if I was making the decision, which clearly I'm not. I would take either a first rounder or a second rounder and a high rotation and or starter quality player. Doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler, but a second and a quality player or a first round pick. That's what I would personally take. But I also understand that what I just said is very, very high value because I'm not trying to just move Marshon Lattimore. Like, I don't even have Marshon Lattimore on the trade block. Let's talk about it in that scenario. Lattimore's not on my trade block. I'm just listening to phone calls when they come in. So it's not like I logged into Madden or 2K and put this guy on the block and I'm just seeing what's available. He's not on the block, but if you want to call me about him, call me. My phone's on. Like, I didn't put it on silent. I'll listen to what you have to say, but it better be good. So I take either a pure first round pick or I take a second rounder, but you have to also give me a player who's ready to actually contribute to my team in 2024. It's a high value. Like, I understand that, but that's like what I said before. The worst thing that happens in this entire conversation we've been having for 30 minutes is New Orleans has a Pro Bowl corner. Like, that's, if the worst thing that happens is I keep a Pro Bowl corner, oh, you got me. You win. So, yeah. Could it severely upset the team morale trading Lattimore? Nope, not at all. It just, I'm not saying that locker room morale and stuff isn't a thing because it absolutely is, but this is a business and no, I don't think so. And as much as I believe Lattimore is arguably up there one of the best players on the team, he isn't the culture of the team. It's like, I don't believe you're trading away your culture. I just believe that he's an extremely talented player. He's the best corner New Orleans has ever had. I give him all the flowers. I give him all the respect he's due. But I don't think it hurts the locker room at all. It's just the part of the business that most people are used to in the NFL. Like, players understand this is a business. Now, rookies and younger players can sometimes be like caught off guard by it, but I don't think that's going to like hurt. Is it going to hurt the locker room any more than Dennis Allen being the head coach? No. Yeah, I said what I said. I said what I said. Is it going to hurt him any more than DA being the head coach? No, it's not. It's okay. It's all right. It's fine. But again, what could you get for him? Also wanted to mention real quick, and I put it in the title, but I wanted to mention kickoff rules. New kickoff rules. So, only the new kickoff rule will only allow teams to attempt an onside kick when trailing in the fourth quarter and requires them to declare it in advance. If it gets finalized and approved, which it hasn't been yet, that would be a heck of a change. In 2023, only 5.2% of attempted onside kicks were recovered, and of that, only 2 total surprise kicks were successful in the entire NFL. And since you can't do run-ups anymore, that's kind of gone away. This is not a guarantee, but this would, to an extent, move to eliminate. I mean, at this point, what's the point of kickoffs? Now, again, this has to be approved by the NFL and voted on, but this is something that is being worked on and discussed, and the owners' meeting will take place March 24th through the 27th. And this is a proposed change by a way that was proposed by special teams coordinators, including your very own Darren Rizzi. Personally, as a fan, I hate this. I hate this idea. I think this is stupid. I think it's absolutely dumb. But the logic is they want to amend certain kickoff rules to increase the rate of returns while maintaining an acceptable injury rate. in order to make the kickoff game exciting again. So there would be here's some more towards kickoff. There'd be a setup zone. The kickoff and return teams would line up on the receiving 40 and 35-yard lines, respectively, and not leave until the ball is touched. And touchbacks, if the ball is kicked in the end zone, the receiving team gets it at the 35-yard line. If the ball is kicked in the target zone and rolls into the end zone, they get it at the 20. So, again, these are more changes. So, number one, you had the one I just mentioned, proposing to only do onside kicks in the fourth quarter. Another one, though, would be to basically take out kicking it out of the end zone intentionally, which is what a lot of teams currently do. They just say boot it to the end zone and make them start on the 20, 25-yard line. If you started doing that intentionally, you would be giving them the ball at the 35 under this proposed rule change. Or if you kicked it to like the 1 and then it rolled into the end zone, they would only get it at the 20. So the goal, it feels like what they're trying to do is give the NFL a trade. That's what it kind of feels like special teams coordinators are trying to do. They're trying to make a trade. Hey, we will give you less dangerous onside kicks and we'll do onside kicks less. And in return, you give us more kickoffs. That's kind of what it feels like they're trying to do. King Arthur, we're not talking about that right now, so I'm not just going to flip conversations. Which, as Nikki points out, would bring back the infamous squib kick, which basically only exists in Madden today. Nobody squib kicks anymore. That's not a thing. So I'm curious what of these rule changes, if any, get accepted. I am not a fan of the idea of the kickoff one for obvious reasons. I think onside kicks, if you want to ambush somebody, you should be able to ambush somebody whenever you want to. But I actually am not opposed to the idea of essentially punishing teams for purposely kicking through the end zone and making them return kickoffs. I actually like that as an idea. I'm curious if it gets voted in. Now, they also adjusted when you can actually move. Instead of the receiving team going ahead and running back and then forming the wall and everything. They're trying to lessen the amount of impact and everything. But I'm curious what these proposed moves can do. Anyway, I just thought it was worth bringing up to talk to y'all to get what chat might think. And in 2023, only 22% of kickoffs were returned. And in the Super Bowl, every kickoff was a touchback. And even though I did enjoy the Super Bowl, it wasn't because any special teams play was enjoyable. And I do think that the third element of the game, offense, defense, special teams, the third element of the game should matter. And it still matters in the punt game, but kickoffs are basically becoming a nothing burger. They've just become a nothing burger. And I do think that for several reasons, kickoffs should matter. I think kickoffs should matter for guys like Devin Hester. I think kickoffs should matter for guys like Deontay Hardy. It gives them an opportunity to make a roster spot and to provide a spark to a team. I think that should matter. I think those guys should have an opportunity. I mean, the fact that the Beermans, Michael Lewis's get found, that the Robies exist, it gives players a spot on a team and the ability to work towards being something else on a team. Special team spots should matter. And with 5% of onside kicks working and 22% of kickoffs even be returned, you get to a point where what's the point of that and not even having a kick returner on the team, or basically just having a wide receiver who is your kick returner instead of an elite electrifying kick returner like a Patterson or a Hester or a Hardy or a Sproles, guys that in our memories as football fans can call out and remember and want those days back. Right now, it feels like we're heading to a time where by the time my son is old enough, I don't even know what a kickoff is. They're just going to give the ball at the 20-yard line and say, hey, offense, go for it. And I don't like that. I like the idea of special teams mattering because it matters in punts and it matters in kickoffs. And I do truly understand the idea of wanting to be healthier and wanting to reduce concussions and all that other stuff. And I think that there are ways you can maybe make kickoffs safer. But taking them away is not the answer, in my opinion. I think that these different rules that we've talked about, like getting rid of onside kicks essentially except for the fourth quarter, but then also creating setup zones and target zones for where kicks are supposed to go. Some of this I like, some of this I don't. And again, these are different things being discussed in the owners' meeting is March 24th through the 27th. I'm very curious to see how it goes. What's safer than a touchback? That's exactly, but it's boring. Like, just because something's safe doesn't mean it's fun. And at the end of the day, and I'm not trying to say that I want players to be injured or anything like that. I am saying it shouldn't matter. And right now, I don't think it does. Yeah, TJ is correct. Like, they say all this whole health and safety nonsense, but then they want to add, 18 games. Then it's clearly not about health and safety. Now you're selling tickets. Like, now you're getting more ad revenue, right? So make the game fun. Work on making it safer. Absolutely. I'm curious what they'll do. And we'll talk about this because, like I said, Darren Rizzi is a very vocal person wanting certain changes. And Darren Rizzi is actually very vocal about wanting kickoffs to matter again. So I'm very curious if the NFL goes that route. Well, guys and gals, if you've been here live, I hope you've had a great time. It is past 8. We're going to wrap up for the night. We'll be back Thursday. The hope is Thursday, if y'all are wanting to, Thursday, we are going to, if you're in the Discord, have an open mic night. We're going to talk mock draft. We're going to talk players. And hopefully y'all have started doing some of y'all's research and you have ideas of what you want and who you want. That's going to be Thursday night. We're going to do some of that together. We'll do some mock drafts, and I think that'll be a good time. Who dat? God bless. I love each and every one of you, every single one of you. Thank you for being part of the show. Thank you for hanging out when we're doing these in the middle of the off season. Appreciate y'all. Catch you Thursday. Deuces. I'm out.